In the small town of Blackwood, tucked away in the forgotten corners of the Pacific Northwest, a darkness lingered. Its streets, once peaceful and quiet, now quivered under the weight of an unspoken fear. For the past decade, a killer, nameless, faceless, had woven his terrifying presence through the town, mimicking the most infamous murderers from the annals of true crime history. Each year, he changed his pattern, adopting the signature methods of a different killer, but always with his own subtle twist, like a painter paying homage to old masters but leaving behind his unique brushstrokes. It began 10 years ago when Blackwood's first body was found, lying cold and mutilated beneath the pale glow of a crescent moon. The victim, a young woman named Sarah Olson, had been shot in the back of the head at close range, her face obscured by the folds of her coat. It was an unsettling crime, made worse by the eerie resemblance it bore to a murder committed in Texarkana decades earlier, the Phantom Killer's infamous Moonlight Murders. For weeks, whispers of the old legend surfaced, connecting the dots in a way that Blackwood Sheriff, Richard Cole, refused to acknowledge at first. But the similarities were undeniable. Sarah had been out with her boyfriend, much like the Phantom's victims, parked on a remote lover's lane just outside of town. Her boyfriend, Tim, was also found dead, shot in the back of the head as they sat in the front seat of his car. The press had a field day, dubbing the murderer the Phantom Reborn, and Blackwood fell into a panicked hush. Parents refused to let their children out after dark. Couples no longer dared to sneak away for stolen kisses in the moonlight. The following year, another murder occurred, but this one was different, eerily so. A young man named Matthew Willis was found stabbed, his body positioned near the shores of a secluded lake. The strange symbols etched into his chest and the cryptic notes left behind at the scene sent shivers down the spines of those familiar with the infamous Zodiac Killer. The police were baffled, but the town's paranoia deepened. It seemed Blackwood was once again the playground of a killer who took pleasure in playing out the roles of the most notorious murderers in history. Sheriff Cole, a man who had prided himself on maintaining order in his little town, found himself standing on the edge of an abyss. His investigation had hit dead ends, no fingerprints, no hair, no DNA. The killer left behind nothing but fear and a string of corpses. He was methodical, precise, and worst of all, unpredictable. Cole didn't know who the killer would imitate next, or when he would strike again. The randomness, the ever-shifting nature of the crimes, gnawed at his sanity. The media christened the killer with a new moniker, the Copycat. It was fitting, but it failed to capture the sheer terror the town felt, knowing that each year brought a new horror, a new game of mimicry in which their lives were the stakes. Year 3 brought the Green River Killer's methods into play. 3 young women, runaways, each with troubled pasts, were found strangled and dumped along the edges of Blackwood River, their bodies bloated and half hidden by the reeds. There were no leads, no signs of struggle. The killer was evolving, refining his craft with each passing year, as if he were learning, perfecting his deadly imitations. Sheriff Cole's desperation grew. He called in the FBI, hoping that someone, anyone, could make sense of the madness. Agents arrived, their faces grim, but they too left empty-handed, bewildered by the killer's ability to transform himself so completely with each murder. They had seen killers change patterns before, but never like this, never with such chilling intent. As year 4 dawned, the town of Blackwood braced itself for the next nightmare. This time, it came in the form of a single victim, a hitchhiker named Rachel, found on the side of a highway, one orange sock still clinging to her foot. The media was quick to draw parallels to the infamous Orange Sock Killer, but this time there was a new twist. Rachel had been alive for days after her abduction, tortured methodically before her body was discarded. The town's collective dread deepened. This killer was not just mimicking the methods of his predecessors, he was evolving them, adding his own sick flair to each crime. By the 5th year, Blackwood had become a ghost town. Many residents had fled, abandoning their homes and businesses in fear. The killer, however, remained, and he would not be ignored. That year, he channeled the horrors of Jack the Ripper, a historical figure thought too old, too distant, to be repeated in modern times. Yet, there it was, a prostitute found with her throat slashed, her body mutilated in a manner reminiscent of the Ripper's Victorian rampage. For the first time, Blackwood saw the physical violence escalate beyond what had been seen before. Sheriff Cole, now haunted by sleepless nights and long empty streets, began to spiral into despair. He had watched, helpless, as the town he swore to protect crumbled beneath the weight of the killer's unseen hand. And each year, Cole felt a personal vendetta in the murders, as if the killer were taunting him, always one step ahead, always careful to leave just enough to make the connection, but never enough to be caught. In the 6th year, the killer adopted the persona of the BTK killer. The victim was a middle-aged woman, a librarian named Mary Simmons, found bound and strangled in her own home. Like BTK, the killer had stalked her for weeks, even sending taunting letters to the police, detailing how he had watched her through her windows, learned her routines, and chosen her as his next victim. The letters were a new addition to his pattern, another sign that this was not merely a copycat but a predator relishing the terror he sowed. As the years stretched on, the killer continued to evolve. He drew inspiration from Ted Bundy, charming his way into his victims' lives before brutally ending them. Then he became the Night Stalker, breaking into homes and leaving behind scenes of unimaginable horror. He even adopted the techniques of lesser-known murderers, ensuring that no pattern would ever be too predictable, no signature too unique to be deciphered. Sheriff Cole's health deteriorated. His mind, once sharp and unyielding, had grown dull with fear and obsession. He had lived with the killer's shadow for so long that it began to feel like a part of him, a darkness that clung to his very soul. The town, now a hollow shell of what it had once been, barely functioned. Businesses closed, houses stood empty, and the few who remained lived in constant fear, locking their doors and never straying far from home. In the 9th year, the killer's methods took an even more chilling turn. He mimicked Dennis Rader, binding and torturing his victims with a cruel precision that left even the most seasoned detectives speechless. His letters to Sheriff Cole became more personal, more direct. He taunted the aging lawman, mocking his inability to protect the town, to stop the slaughter. "You're just as much a part of this as I am," one letter read. A reflection in a broken mirror. And then came the 10th year. By now, Blackwood was a husk of its former self, a town that seemed to exist solely for the killer's game. This time, the killer did something unexpected. He didn't choose a famous murderer to emulate. Instead, he created his own gruesome masterpiece. A family of 4 was found slaughtered in their home, each member killed in a different way, one strangled, one stabbed, one bludgeoned, and one shot. There was no signature, no familiar method to trace. It was a declaration, a final crescendo to a decade-long symphony of terror. The media swarmed, but there was little left to cover. The killer's name was on everyone's lips, but no one knew who he was, or why he had chosen Blackwood. His identity remained as elusive as ever, his motives buried beneath layers of mimicry and madness. Sheriff Cole, now a broken man, sat alone in his office, staring at the walls lined with unsolved cases and crime scene photos. The town was dead, the people gone, and yet the killer remained free, slipping through the cracks like smoke. The final letter arrived that winter, addressed to Cole personally. It read, "I've worn the masks of many, but now I wear my own. You will never know my face, but you've always known my shadow. I am the reflection in every fear, every nightmare. I am Blackwood's ghost." The sheriff crumpled the letter in his trembling hands, his heart heavy with the knowledge that the killer would never be caught, never be named. He had become a part of Blackwood, an invisible ghost haunting the town long after the last victim had fallen. And as the final winter snow fell upon the empty streets, the shadow of many faces lingered, waiting for the next chapter in its twisted story to begin. Or forever be left unresolved.